I think we meet under good circumstances. You will have been introduced to the panel here. The new board members are sitting on my left. There is only one board member who submitted an apology and couldn't be here today because of other commitments. But on Friday last week, we held a special general meeting of SAA where I officially rotated board members, retired some of the older board members, and officially appointed the new board members. The meeting today was with the full board complement, both returning and incoming, to outline to them some of the shareholder expectations as they commence with their new term of office as appointed by the board, by the cabinet. Obviously, the first and perhaps very urgent issue is the holding of the next AGM, which the date of which I have set for the 28th of January 2018. This is because the annual financial statements could not be finalized in time. The board AGM was supposed to be on the 28th of October this year, but it has had to be postponed given the fact that the annual financial statements had not been finalized. The going concern status of the airline, and the CFO can talk a little bit about the challenges which we faced with regard to resolving the liquidity and solvency issues affecting the airline. Those issues have been attended to. The annual financial statements have been submitted to the Auditor General. We expect a final opinion in December, which will be in time for us to hold within 15 days the next AGM of the airline. We think that will be a significant step. I have given the new board the directive that previously, for the last 3 to 4 years, the airline has been non-adherent with the PFMA and other requirements to submit their reports on time, which has meant every year we've needed to postpone the submission of our reports to the National Assembly and the NCOP for consideration by Parliament. I have given the board a directive to ensure that that comes to an end, so that by next year our reports are submitted on time, as is expected of all the entities reporting to the National Treasury, in terms of the requirements of Parliament as well as the Public Finance Management Act. During the course of the meeting, I also addressed with the board a number of challenges, including cost containment measures, the issues of ensuring that there is proper communication between the internal and external stakeholders, and I raised a number of other issues which I thought were important for the new board to take into consideration as they commence with their term of office. It is my expectation that the board as well as the shareholder will support the CEO as well as the executive managers. Topmost on our agenda is the implementation of the turnaround plan so that we can bring the airline back to financial sustainability. I would want the board to ensure that the turnaround plan becomes embedded not only in the corporate plan but the entire functioning of the organization, and it becomes a part of the livelihood of all members of the airline. In support of the turnaround plan, I have indicated to the board that I would want them to report to me by December this year the cost containment measures that they are going to implement in support of the turnaround plan, and I expect that the board is going to pay very urgent attention to how they are going to ensure that in implementing the turnaround plan, we also implement the recommendations, the remedial action which was proposed by the 3 forensic investigations that were conducted by the airline, and we engage with other stakeholders within the airline to address some of the challenges that have been raised with us before. There are 2 areas that I, as the shareholder, will be paying attention to. The first is the establishment of an optimal corporate structure for our aviation assets. That means the consolidation of our airline assets, South African Airways, Mango, and South African Express. An interministerial committee is being established in that regard, and the relevant ministers will be working together to address all of those issues and provide a way forward that will ensure that we can optimize resources, we can optimize our assets, and gain more value from them. The second area that I will be paying attention to in support of the airline is the whole of state aviation policy framework, in terms of which a number of government departments have to work together to support our aviation programs. Not only the airline itself, but our entire aviation programs. That will bring together the departments of public enterprises, of transport, the Department of Home Affairs, and other relevant departments to update the 2011 whole of state aviation policy framework and make sure that it becomes relevant and adjusts to the new conditions in support of our turnaround plan. It will be very, very important going forward that we, in addition to all that I have said, and so that we can become successful in implementing all of these plans, it will be important that we have a clear delineation of roles between the shareholder, the board, and the executive management of the airline led by the CEO. Quite obviously, the CEO is the leader of SAA. He runs the airline, he's been given the powers to do so. One of the things that the new CEO must do is to establish very clear control measures that will improve the operation of the airline and ensure that we can deal with irregularities, malfeasance, and re-establish confidence among the public, as well among members of the public, stakeholders of SAA and its patrons in particular, as well as the internal stakeholders on the airline, to have confidence that the airline is being run properly. But the CEO is also the main spokesperson of the airline, not the Minister of Finance, and certainly not the chairman of the board. The board is there to support and not substitute for the CEO. That delineation of roles is going to be very critical going forward, so that nobody steps on another's toes. But that imposes on the CEO the obligation to ensure that we get the reports we need to get, and there is adequate information available to the board and to the shareholder as to the goings on within the airline and the progress being made in implementing the turnaround plan. We are going to have a board induction for the new board to bring them up to speed with PFMA and other legislation under which they operate. But as you are all aware, we've got a very solid and strong board with extensive experience, and this is probably the last time that you hear me talk so long about SAA, because as I said, it's the duty of the CEO, and the CEO will be taking over from me. Today was an official handover, and I'm quite confident that the board is clued up as to the challenges that the airline is facing and the expectations on them by members of the public and by the shareholder. We will, in the coming few months, continue to address the funding requirements for the airline. You will know that in the MTBPS we had made a commitment of 10 billion rand to South African Airways during the course of this year, which means that we are going in tranches to be giving SAA money up to the 31st of March this year. But we are also going to continue engaging our Angolan colleagues for the repatriation of the 1 billion rand owed to SAA by Angola. But in addition to that, we will continue in this regard to have discussions about the strategic equity partner for South African Airways, because ultimately we are going to need not only private sector capital, but also expertise for us to move forward and bring SAA back to sustain. Airline will need, and that fleet is not going to be paid for either by the national fiscus or by the mega revenues that the airline is going to be generating during this time as they try to turn around and fund the turnaround strategy. So we need to get a strategic equity partner that is going to provide capital for us to move for, in that regard. I think what I have said suffices for now to give you just a glimpse with a little bit of detail of the issues that I discussed with the new board, and the chairman of the board will make a few remarks, the CEO will make a few remarks, we will take questions. Thank you. So,
thank you, Minister, for your comments, and also thank you very much for this morning, because before we accepted this challenge of SAA, we had requested you that you should spell out exactly what you expect from us as a new board, which you have clearly done this morning, and we are happy that the deliverables that are expected from SAA are quite clear. And what is very encouraging for me is that in my engagements with the CEO prior to this morning, 99% of the issues that you touched upon were the issues that we have been discussing with the CEO. What is going to happen now, I think it's important that we really need to reconstitute board committees to make sure that the work begins almost immediately. The induction that you refer to is going to be critical so that we can now begin to see exactly what are the strengths that we are going to be delivering to you as the minister and delivering to the South African public as such. I must emphasize, Minister and members of the media, that one of the things that could well have been a problem with SAA was not the clear delineation of roles, responsibilities, functions, and relationships between the shareholder, the board, and the executives. In my life, if those are blurred, then you have a serious formula for chaos and remorse, as we put it in Afrikaans. That is going to be clearly defined. The board is responsible for corporate governance, making sure that the executive comes up with a strategy that meets all the requirements that the minister has spelled out. We'll give him support on those. The next month or two is going to be serious work for us. But otherwise, the job of running the company belongs to the CEO and his executives, and we will make sure that we as a board don't interfere in that role and function. And therefore, members of the media, From our side, we have, as a board, a number of skills that the minister have put in the board, which I believe will stand this airline in good stead going forward. In my way, in my parlance, we are at the brink. We either fall over or we take steps back from the brink. And for us as a board, it's back from the brink, and pretty soon and pretty smart. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Magwaza. CE?
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's my 5th day today at the SAA. I've engaged so far with the EXCO, with staff. What I've seen so far is the willingness of people of SAA to really work hard with everybody else to bring SAA into a sustainable basis. I've spoken to employees on the ground. I've also spoken to technical people. I've also engaged with the EXCO. Some of the priority actions we have to do is really bring in closed vacancies, bring in people to make sure there's capacity of SAA to execute on the plan. So that's the big focus area. We put out advertisement for the EXCO roles because there's quite a number of vacancies at that level. So we have to bring in capacity and skill, and also really start to look at the other layers within the key areas, whether it's the revenue management or flight operations, to really start to stabilize the environment there. So stabilizing the management team, building capacity to execute on the LTTS is one of the key focus areas for us. If you look at what we have today in terms of the direction that the board and the shareholders given us, they've given us a portfolio of options to work with. However, to execute on the strategy, we need to bring in capacity, we need to stabilize the organization, bring in closed vacancies, bring in, appoint permanent people who are going to be committed and skilled to execute on the plan. So that's the immediate focus for me today.
Thank you very much. I will now chair the, you can sit down, Clady. I'll chair the question and answer session. I think we will take a few questions and answer them. As we said earlier, the CE is here, the chair of the board are here. I'm only the facilitator of this session. You know the drill. You introduce yourself and the media house from which you come, and then you carry on. I will take the hand here. There's a hand there. There's a hand here, and another one here. So there are 4 hands for now. And you can indicate to whom you are directing the question.
Good morning, Arabile Kumete from Bloomberg News. Minister, the question is just to you. I laud your commitment to the task at hand, but would you be having this AGM on a Sunday? That's when the
28th, yeah.
Thank you, Arabile. That was very witty. Second question.
My name is Peter, I'm a training operator. Just a question for both Minister and CEO. With the discussion with the strategic ecosystem partner, how far are you, who are you talking to, and when can we expect an announcement?
Thank you very much. Question 3.
I would like to question on the quarters.
Yeah, who are you?
The old floor, I didn't say. To add to that question, what percentage do you envisage for an equity partner? But my question is, when you accommodate new skills, this is to the CEO, you planning to accommodate new skills in SAA, how would you put it in without curve? Would you replace people? Are you going to fire people? Bring in new skills?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Minister Joe Fraser, Cape Messenger. 2 questions, if I may. First of all, just following up on that equity partner, has anyone shown any interest? Because, as you know, the media writes a lot of nasty things about SAA, and one could imagine that some people might be deterred from any form of commercial relationship with this airline. And secondly, a question to the chairman. You mentioned it's a recipe for chaos when the board, the executive, and the stakeholder aren't playing their roles. Looking back, who was the biggest villain in the past SAA setup? And finally, I see we have titles but no names on all these little bits of paper. Does that mean you can recycle them when you bring another one?
Let me start with the last question, Joe. We will recycle the paper. Thank you. You are correct. We don't subscribe to any wastage. So the paper is up for recycling. So the answer to your question is contained already in the question. You are very correct.
I was talking more about recycling the board than the paper.
Oh yeah. Well, there's no title before you. I don't know whether you are also up for recycling.
Well, put me on the board, give me the money, I'm free. Yeah, lovely.
We will most probably
Send you my CV, Minister.
We'll most probably recycle you. Now, let's get on to the serious questions that were asked. Arabile, the deadline of January the 28th doesn't necessarily mean the AGM must be on Sunday. But if board members are as committed as I am, certainly we can have it on the 28th. But it will be before. The fact of the matter is that in terms of the PFMA, we must have at least 15 months. The AGM must be held within 15 months after the due date of the AGM, if it's not held on its due date. So we have set the deadline of the 28th, by which time we think we will have met the requirements, because the draft financial statements have been submitted to the AG, and we expect a final report by this final opinion by the 7th of December. And so we do think that before the 28th of January we will have held the AGM.
So just on clarification, so you're saying that you will hold the AGM before the 28th?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. The question on the SEP, we will answer all the three questions. The board will start the discussions on the route. So we need to establish a roadmap towards that decision. We need to look at what point do we start, what would be the percentage, what form it would be. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done before we make an announcement and even start going out on a request for proposals and so on. And that will include what percentage of the SEP are we looking at. There are discussions which must also be held with the shareholder to test the shareholders' appetite. And I think there are proposals which have been made. We need to now look at the reports, look at those recommendations together with the board, and decide how we move forward in regard to that. But there are many people, you know, you'll be interested to know that there are many people who've shown an interest in this, even long before we made this announcement. There were already discussions about an exploration of an SEP for SAA. They range from airlines to financial institutions to other investors. So there are varied interests to this SEP. We're not excited. Nobody has been spoken to yet. People can express their views. They can send SMSs if they want. We're not interested in all of that. Once we start the process formally, we will announce that we now are starting the process of seeking an SEP for SAA, and then the structures that are going to manage that process will also be announced. The roadmap, the process, and we will do it properly. There will be no underhanded, in the dark types of engagements. We're not interested in any of that. I think to answer for the chair with regard to whether there is any villain, the fact of the matter is we have a new board. Let's forget about harping on the past. We have work to do. We've clearly outlined our expectations. That work needs to be done. And I'm convinced that the new board, given the types of skills that we have brought together, are competent to deliver on the mandate that we have given them. But let me ask the CE to answer, and then the chair, if he wants to comment on any of the issues that
Maybe
you
I
asked.
should start.
Oh yeah, maybe the chair should start.
Look, thank you very much for these questions. The questions are quite clear. In terms of who are the villains, let me just make this one statement. You can't drive this car looking at the rear view mirror. What happened before has happened. The responsibility of this board is to take this business into the future and take it differently. And that's the commitment we're making to the people of South Africa. With regard to the strategic equity partner, it's not a process that you start willy-nilly. You need first to understand what type of a strategic equity partner that you need. What is that strategic equity partner other than money is going to be bringing into the partnership? And the board, helped by the executives, would have to apply its mind long before we take a proposal to the minister and his colleagues to say, this has been the thinking that has gone through this thing. One of the things that was asked at the meeting we had this morning by one of the board members was that the performance of SAA doesn't actually create a sexy organization that is going to be able to bring a lot of money here. The essence of that issue is on what basis are you going to actually look at the price for this organization? Obviously, price earnings and those kinds of things would not be appropriate for a South African Airways in its current state. Other ways of looking at establishing the amount of money that you need and the size of the equity that you're going to give to somebody else is going to be part of the discussions that the board will have to attend to very, very seriously. You asked the question about purging people. When you get into an organization of this nature, where there is a business that finds itself in the conditions in which the South African Airways finds itself, there are no sacred cows. But the last thing you do is to say, if we have a war on waste, the only area where waste is in people, then you are going to get the wrong end of the stick, because the waste is not only found in people, the waste is found in how the business is run, and what the minister put to us as a board in terms of his expectations, 99% of them lie outside people. We, as the CEO has stated, we want to strengthen the skills in the organization. If it comes to people, it will be the last resort. The CEO is already engaging with the employees to make sure that he understands where they are coming from and the contribution that they can make in the transformation of this organization.
Thank you, CE.
I think the chair has covered, but in a very simple way. There's quite a number of vacancies at EXCO, so we'll be able to bring capacity into the EXCO to strengthen EXCO just using vacancies. Chief Commercial Officer role is vacant, we're recruiting for, and so on. We can strengthen the leadership team without trade-offs at the moment, so it's quite an easy task actually.
Thank you very much. Second round of questions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Don't forget your number.
Don't pass.
Number 2.
My name is Colin Limawani from the SABC. My question is with regards to the routes that have been abandoned, both on the African continent and locally. How are you going to make up for the shortfall, and which routes are you going to prioritize?
Thank you very much. Number 3. You see, I said don't forget your number.
From ENCA. A question for your minister, multi-pronged in a way. You talked about 1 billion rand that is owed to SAA via one. Could you please just elaborate on that and also the process that is involved in sort of working with that? But also in terms of the ongoing support that you mentioned, are you able to put a figure to it so that South Africans are all on board as to what to expect? And then my last question, I know you say that you can't drive this vehicle looking at the rear view mirror, but planes don't have rear view mirrors, they have black boxes. When you look at the black box, recently the former chairperson, Dudumian, was talking on ANN7, basically pointing to a number of issues that she believes are at the heart of the troubles of SAA. What did you make of that conversation that she was pointing to historical things from the times of Coleman Andrews, the issues around the leasing of the fleet, and sort of giving a picture that there's almost a deliberate attempt to make SAA unworkable such that it's then privatized?
Thank you. Number 4. Thank you very much.
Leo Blom again. You refer to consolidating the other parts of the aviation, or SAA's assets. Would you give us some detail on that? That's one. And the second, you refer to a turnaround plan. Can you sketch out the thumbnail for us? Give us an idea of what turnaround plan is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Last question.
Terence Creamer, Engineering News. Just, Minister, on the capital, the injection of 10 billion, if you could just confirm how much has already flowed, what the timetable and schedule is for the rest of the money to flow, and sort of what phases, how much you've got immediately available as Treasury in form of reserves, and when will you start really needing to sell disposed assets to make up the balance? And secondly, quite a lot was spoken about the powers of the CEO and the board, but were any constraints or non-negotiables placed on the board and the CEO with regard to jobs, the fleet, routes, and consolidation? What if the board disagrees that SAX should be consolidated into this entity? Thanks.
Thank you very much. So I'll start with my questions and then come to the yes. My questions start. I'll answer Tula Sizwe and Terence on the funding together. Angola owes SAA close to R1 billion. I think the CFO can answer that question of this money. So we need to get this money repatriated back to SAA to contribute towards the cash reserves for the airline ongoing. The ongoing support. So in the MTBPS we announced 10 billion rand Of that 10 billion rand, approximately 5.2 plus has already been paid. So you have outstanding, let me round it up to 4.8. That 4.8 is going to be delivered to the airline in tranches of 1 billion rands in every month. 1 billion rand end of November, 1 billion rand end of December, 1 billion rand in January. Then the last tranche will be delivered at the end of March 2018. So that's the payment arrangement during every month until the end of March, amounting to 4.8 billion rand. You will know that at the beginning of July, when Standard Chartered wanted their 2.8 billion, we had to give them that through, we utilized Section 16 of the PFMA, and then when we had to pay Citibank 1.9 billion, we also had to utilize Section 16 of the PFMA, and then we have regularized that through the MTBPS process, which is going to be debated in Parliament next week. And so we have made those payment arrangements right until the end of March next year. The IMC ASHA is not yet constituted. The President will constitute it. We have made the request because you need a number of ministers. There are two issues that you need to handle. One is the consolidation of the assets. There you need mainly the Minister of Public Enterprises and the Minister of Transport and the Minister of Finance, of course. And then you need an IMC that will look at the whole of state aviation, which would now include the Minister of Home Affairs and any other ministers that we may identify in the course of that. So there are no timelines as yet as to that work, but there are proposals. Remember that this decision is also not even a new decision. It's an old decision emanating from the 2013 turnaround strategy. It hasn't been implemented. In the course of that, you've had the deterioration of the financial position of South African Express. And we now need to deal with this because in the course of all of this, you've got different boards, different executives, different assets. They play complementary roles, but they have not been optimized. South African Express remains a regional carrier with that capability, but it could have strategic long-term contribution to the optimal structure, including if we took the decision to establish regional hubs, which also was an old decision we had taken, that we would establish regional hubs in the east of Africa and the west of Africa. Now, if you were to deploy assets in that regard, you would have to look at an asset with the capabilities for regional travel, which is what SA Express can provide. Then you have a low-cost carrier, which is your Mango, competing in the domestic space with other low-cost carriers, and you can utilize, because some of the aircrafts that Mango utilizes have got ability at least to fly short-term regional routes. So once all of these assets are consolidated, and as part of the route network strategy that South African Airways is going to be developing, they need to put all of these assets and the quality and size of the metal into the plan and decide how they are all going to be deployed so that we can optimize on their availability. But insofar as your long-haul carriers, your the fleet that SAA runs for the long haul flights, you then need to look at their capacity at the moment, their age, whether they are cost efficient, fuel efficient, their contribution to carbon emissions, and determine, because you also don't want to run a fleet that is going to cost us carbon levies in other countries, that's going to be penalized in the EU and other countries. We need to look at how do we get ourselves fleet that is cost and fuel efficient and that we can use without fears of penalties abroad. So these are all the discussions that we are going to discuss, and I think that answers also the question you asked about the consolidation details, the turnaround plan. I think the CEO will answer that, and the CFO. And I think the asset sales, we had said in the confidence boosting measures we announced in July that we will identify assets in all the SOEs that are liable for, or that that can be disposed of, and then we will announce them at that moment. But I have asked the board of SAA to look at immediate assets they can identify within the airline that can be disposed of in order to strengthen the balance sheet of the airline. We then would expect a report from them in that regard. So I think that the chairman and the deputy chairperson, the CE and CFO can then handle the other questions that we asked. I can't remember the question you asked about the board, Terence.
You spoke a lot about the powers, not the constraints on the board.
The constraints?
Any non-negotiables around jobs or routes or consolidation, etc.?
No, we haven't put those. The only constraints we have put are the conditions emanating from the 10 billion rand recapitalization we have provided. That's the only constraint. Broadly speaking, we've not given them any, because we understand that the airline is in turnaround phase. We may need to do things not in a usual way, but there are conditions that we have sent to the airline as part of the recap plan, and we expect those to be complied with. Some of those are contained already in the statements I have made, such as the asset disposals, the cost containment measures which need to be provided to me. We've provided dates around some of them so that there is clarity as to when we expect those to be provided. But, Chair? Or Deputy Chair?
Maybe just to add on what the Minister is saying, I think this morning he was very clear on the what that needs to be done, and there's clear alignment for all of us on that. But as the board, we have to look at the how of delivering that strategy, obviously working with executive management, and that's where then if there are particular points of clarity and discussion and debate, those will happen between the board with the minister around the how of how we achieve the 5-year plan.
Thank you. CE?
Okay, thank you very much. I think the CFO will answer the